right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is January 20th, 2021, and it is Inauguration Day. And I know most of you will be watching this on replay sometime later in the week, but here we are. Thought I would do a show today and normal Wednesday show and take a look at a few things. So this morning, in the first half hour of trading, the S&P hit an all-time high on Inauguration Day. So starting a new administration with the market at an all-time high, and some would say that all-time high valuations. So that's kind of interesting. But interesting thing about the market at an all-time high is that there is no overhead resistance, right? So lots going on. Here's a little chart of the SPY. I like to look at the SPY because it actually is the best sort of reflection of the opens. And so there you go. Zoom out a little bit and take a look at kind of how the year went, how it's going. You know, I haven't really done the calculations, but there's the previous all-time high, right? So back here, and then of course we had the big sell-off in the spring of last year, and here we go. So as I've been saying on this show for a while, this is basically at this juncture anyway, this is the primary trend line, and it's rising at a pretty good clip. A couple of long-range days there that I just drew the rising trend line across the lows. As long as that trend line's holding, obviously the market is still, in the very near term, is in an uptrend, right? So it's been pretty amazing, really. We haven't seen, since the beginning of November, we haven't really seen anything that resembles a sell-off. Couple little, I don't even know if you call those dips, be honest with me. But let's look at the NASDAQ 100, because NASDAQ 100 hit a new high too this morning. So that'll be easy to remember. The market hit an all-time high on Inauguration Day, and we'll have to see where it goes from here. So it's going to be interesting. Nevertheless, a new administration is always interesting, and so if you guys have been around for a while, you know that I'm not big into politics at all. I try not to. I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it, and boy, am I sick of hearing about politics. So I can barely even watch the news anymore. So anyway, I hope that as we go forward, that things will sort of start to get back to whatever I guess you would characterize as normal. But so here we go. Same thing on the NASDAQ 100, right? Rising at a pretty good clip, hitting an all-time high today as we speak, and so everything seems to be looking good so far. And the first sign of trouble the first sign of potential trouble, obviously, will be some sort of a sell down that breaks these rising trend lines, right? Real quick look at the Russell. Man, the Russell is just, this is kind of, over the years, I used to say that the Russell in 2000 was probably the best indicator of, as far as the indexes go, was probably the best indication of participation and sort of, speculation, participation, all that kind of stuff, because the thing about the small caps is, not that it matters, but not that it seems to matter at this moment, but there's a lot of a lot of unprofitable companies out there that people are loading up on and buying and speculating in, and so so goes the Russell 2000, so goes the what am I trying to say here? So goes the Russell 2000, so goes the market sentiment. I guess is basically what I'm driving at. So the market sentiment is, because I mean this is 2,000 stocks, right? The Dow's one thing, and of course the S&P is heavily loaded, and the NASDAQ 100 is heavily weighted, and just a handful of stocks. But the Russell 2000 is pretty broad, and the Russell, man, is this thing's really rising at a big clip here, playing a little bit of catch up. This horizontal line I have drawn on the chart goes back to like 2018 when it peaked, and then it's been a long time. Let me see if I think it was 28. Yeah, it was 2018. Russell 2000 hit an all-time high in 2018, and then boy, it took all the way towards the end of 2020 till mid-November to break through those highs, and so that's kind of a parabolic move right there, but again, it's all good until these trend lines get broken to the downside, and we don't see any sign of that yet. So let's move on real quick. I'm just going to go over the open trades here. I think that's probably the thing, and then we can all watch the inauguration coverage on TV because that's the main theme of the day. So without further ado, this ATUS at the top of the open trades list is triggering in today as we speak. I'm showing a real-time quote, 36.56. So yeah, it's right here. Trigger was 36 and a quarter, gapped up a little bit this morning. No big deal. Let's look at this chart here. Wow. Pretty impressive. Looks like we had a trade back over here in this same stock. Actually, funny thing is that, and I know it's all scrunched up on the chart, but look at that really nice sort of sell down. I drew a trend line across the highs. Sold off back here. It had just a really nice orderly looking sort of, but notice how steep this sell-off is. This is a pretty steep sell-off, but so was this one, right? So this stock has a habit of, obviously the longer term trend is higher, and this stock has a habit of selling down, and then look at that, broke that trend line and ripped higher. So anyway, if I zoom in on it a little bit difficult, well, I guess it's not that difficult to draw a trend line across the highs. It's kind of, but there you go. So anyway, this one triggered in on a long range day yesterday, as you can see, which is not always optimal, but at the same time, a lot of stocks, they make a move like whatever that was yesterday for whatever reason, and then that kicks off a move towards to new highs, or just it kicks off a move that really starts going. So anyway, decent entry here. Decent entry today, and I'm going to put the target on here because, zoom out a little bit, the target is way up here at 39.50. Wow. So there you go. In order for this particular stock, and what's interesting is that I don't say most, but the majority of the stocks, they go into this pullback mode, and then when they start going up, the target's actually about roughly 3/4 of the way back to the previous highs. In this instance, the target is all the way up here at 39.50, which means that it's going to need to make another high. Now here's the thing, big scheme of things, doesn't seem like a huge big deal, right? As long as this is kicking off a resumption of the primary trend, which is higher, and there's no reason to think it isn't. So, and there you go, the initial stops just going right down at the low of the pattern here, and so it's pretty good pivot spot. So anyway, this stock could clang around inside of yesterday's bar, maybe for a couple days, even pull back a little bit. But so far so good. and it's still obviously early in the day, and so you get these. Look, it's starting to climb back up already, and so you get these days where we see this all the time. Especially most of you guys that watch the show on replay later in the day or later in the week, you see this all the time. When I'm doing these shows in the morning, sometimes the stock will open and look kind of weak, like it wants to pull back, and then by the end of the day, it's gone green and made a pretty good move. So that target definitely seems reasonable there. So anyhow, triggering in this morning as we speak. ATUS. I'm not familiar with what this company does, but I don't think that matters. Doesn't matter to our system. Moving down the list here, we have one that just triggered in a couple days ago. XLRN, and you can see that the trailing stop is already ratcheted up, right? So triggered in here a couple days ago. Let's see, I would have been on Monday, obviously, and triggered in right there, and basically just right around the trigger price. Didn't gap up too much. So target on this, I see target on this is 141. I see something that I need to fix every now and then. Every now and then there's a little glitch on the back end, but there we go. Target 141. Seems reasonable. This is another case where, and I mean, a lot of it's just sort of due to the nature of the pullback. So this seems like a pretty deep pullback here, honestly. Last week I pointed out the symmetry between this pullback and the current pullback, and there we go. There's a bit of symmetry to that. You know, on these pullbacks, the trend lines aren't always perfect, but actually that's not bad. If this was a candlestick chart, you know, that'd just be a little wick up there. So usually when I like the open, high, low, close charts, but I also go through and look at everything on a candlestick chart too. But let's see. Yeah, here's my candlestick chart. So yeah, I mean that looks pretty reasonable as far as the trend line. I could start it from up here or whatever, but you can see that it's almost at the same angle as back here. And look at how when it broke this trend line on like a gap up and sort of a long range day, started a nice little rally here, and there was a pullback. So this is a little bit different, just in the way that it sort of reversed. But nevertheless, so far so good. So you can see how fast the trailing stop has the potential of ratcheting up. So from 112.25, where the initial stop was down around these lows, and since we got some forward progress, it's already ratcheted up. It's another case where the stock itself is going to have to push past the previous high in order to hit the target. So no big deal. A lot of it just depends on the way that they trigger in. If this thing had sort of gone sideways for a few days, you know, it has like these sort of V reversals on the chart, and so just based on the way it triggered in. Now, if it had got into like a little narrow range sideways move back here, then this trigger price would have probably come down a little bit more, and it would have triggered in a little closer to the reversal point. But it is what it is, and that's just sort of the nature of what the market does. So there we go. All right, moving down the list, mRNA, which you would think, you know, obviously this is one of the two vaccine makers, and so what's funny is Pfizer's the very next one, but that was a pretty nice little pullback, change in trend, and you know, it's just kind of it's just trying to sort of consolidate here, and hopefully the next move is higher. But you can see here that this has only been open for a few days too, and you can see the trailing stop has already ratcheted up just a little bit. Pretty big move, really, 102 to 110, but so now it's just under like this little consolidation level right here. And so far so good on this. Decent looking pattern. If you watched a few weeks ago, we were looking at this when it was actually on the pending list, and it was like a potential setup, and that's when I drew this line, and then I drew this sort of big support level here. And it's pretty amazing. I drew this support level when the stock was still in pullback mode, and it's pretty amazing how it just literally like held there and turned right at that big support level there. So anyhow, not looking too bad. Yesterday was kind of, and I don't know, I'm not following the news on this, so I don't know why it gapped down a little bit yesterday. It was down like 4 or 5%, but just gapped down, pushed a little bit higher, and so it's just kind of hanging out at this level right here. So it is what it is. And as I alluded to, Pfizer is obviously the other vaccine maker and the other open trade. It's kind of a weird looking pattern here. I'm not sure what to make of it because it had this big run up, and now it's kind of come back down and just sort of consolidating. Here's obviously the primary trend line, kind of way down here. So anyway, not a whole lot of risk on this. It was forming this sort of like round, like almost like a cup, like starting to cup up, and obviously looking pretty good. And then for whatever reason, they're just selling it down a little bit here, and so it was a pretty tight stop to start off with. I mean, we're talking $1 here, and so it'll be interesting to see if it can get anything going. Basically, it's just got to hold the lows of this pullback. So, every now and then, you get a trade like this, and they just fail, right? It looked very viable, and of course the system itself. Let me zoom back in time a little bit here. Is that 1 day? Yeah. So like right here, I mean these rounding patterns right here, a lot of times, that's indicative, especially if you looked at like the MACD or the stochastics or whatever. Like right here, they were going to show that, hey, this thing's starting to rally back up, and there was like kind of on these rounding patterns. Sometimes I'll put a horizontal line across like the prior highs there. So it definitely attempted to change trend. And then the following day, they sold it back down for whatever reason, and it's had a bunch of little kind of narrow range days here. So anyway, as long as it holds these prior lows, then it'll be okay. Otherwise, if it fails, I mean, if it's gonna fail and head back down here, obviously you wouldn't wanna hold it for that. So that it's a tight stop, not a whole lot of risk, and not a huge big deal, because you get one like this that makes up for it. This NEO, while it has had a fairly significant pullback here recently, as of last night's close, it was still up about 19% from the entry back here. Interestingly enough, the trailing stop is now at the exact same level as the target, the original target, which is 52. So it was basically a parabolic run up, and of course that's where the parabolic stop comes in up there. So the system basically threw that parabolic stop out and said, hey, this stock has made a unsustainable parabolic move, and if you wanted to just lock it in, well, that's what the P-stop's all about. So anyway, we got a little bit of a sell down here. Closed closed this gap, but not this one. This gap hasn't been closed, and it's still trying to hold its own. So still looking pretty good. Worst case scenario, if one were holding it sort of by the book, half off at the target, holding the other half to see, what as far as it'll run, it's still looking pretty good, to be honest with you, because worst case scenario is it pulls back to and gets stop gets tagged, at what was the original target. So so far so good. We'll see how, and of course, this is one of the EV stocks, one of the hot ones, and stocks like this, I mean, they tend to make really significant moves, and that's what we saw here. So at one point, this thing was up, I think over 30%. So still looking okay here. I would expect after a run like it made, and if you think about it, this run started at about $40, right? And very short amount of time ran up to over 66. So that's a huge move there. So a little bit of a pullback consolidation is perfectly normal. And then moving on to the very last one, and I wanted to mention, since we still have the way that these are sorted here, it has to do with the sorting of the system and the dates. So once these two stocks from last year come off of here, then the sort will be in order again. So there we go. Anyway, so this one just triggered in here recently, and the initial stop's still sitting in here. Yeah, this is kind of low volume. This is the coffee ETN, not ETF, but ETN. It's kind of low volume, but it does move. It moves in these big sort of cycles, and so we'll just have to see. We'll have to see what this does. Not particularly fond of this myself, but commodities have been sort of on a tear, right? Some of them, anyway. I think, and so oops, I'm only on my second cup of coffee here this morning, so this is meant to be the target up here. So real quick, I'll put the target on here, which is $39, and it looks doable. It had this kind of big run here, and on Monday, boy, it had that big gap up, and now it's just kind of coming back in a little bit. So, but you can see that it has a habit of having these little sort of pullbacks in that. So just a couple days into this, so far so good. $1 from the trigger to the trailing stop, although this did trigger in a little bit higher. Not much though, not much, because it's kind of gappy. That's one thing that I've noticed on this, and that's just sort of a function of the low volume. So anyway, so there you go. There's the open trades. The ATUS being the one that's triggering in today, so we'll see how that works out. Market at an all-time high. As I've been speaking over the last, just 20 minutes. As I've been speaking for the last 20 minutes, the market has just really sort of ripped to a new high. So S&P is up, as we speak, 42 points, which is 1%, and we're in blue sky territory. So here we go. Kicking off a brand new administration, and of course they're showing. I just looked over at the TV that they're showing the presidential motorcade and all that stuff. So it'll be interesting, I suppose, to watch all this. I'm not a huge fan of politics, but days like this only come along either once every 4 or 8 years. So I guess today is the day that I have to, whatever they decide to show on CNBC. Yeah, it's always interesting when something, when there's a new president, right? 4 years ago, when Trump got elected, there was a lot of people out there that thought that he would be bad for the market, that the market was going to tank, and a lot of famous people came out and said if Trump got elected, the market would crash or sell off or whatever. And so it's I don't know what the exact figure is, but it's up pretty significantly from when he took office. And so today is it's not official yet, but in an hour and a half, we'll have a new administration. So it'll be interesting to see how the market performs under new administration. Although I got to tell you, Biden's starting off in a tough spot because with the market at an all-time high already on the day he's inaugurated, and with the idea that there's a lot of this everything about the valuations are stretched, and that's not my opinion. That's just you can look at Goldman Sachs puts out a report periodically that measures the market valuations based on like a dozen historical metrics. And last time that I saw that little table there, it's like all of the metrics were stretched significantly. So we're in like the top of the valuation range historically, and so I guess the market's going to need to grow into these valuations, that's a tall order. But anyway, all that aside, um, it is what it is, and the system is going to. There's only a couple of pending trades left, which you can see on the pending list, but the system's just going to ignore the news, go on the technicals, and take it from there. So anyway, have a good rest of the week, and I will see you guys back here, same